Okay, so welcome everybody. We have another chat in our FEAT series, and today we would very much like to welcome Jessamy Koratoga, who is Head of Science at Animal Aid, and she's here to talk to us about the stats that the government have issued, the annual statistics of scientific procedures, and what they do and don't mean. So over to you, Jessamy.
Thank you. I just said to Imogen and Alan, because the stats are kind of a quite a I always say chewy. They can be a bit dry and intense. So I've done some slides just to give everyone a bit of an overview. And then I thought if people have got specific questions, we could maybe go through those all together. I can share my screen and we can go through the stats. I've also tweaked the tables a little bit so that they're a bit more user friendly and can just show people how they work. So if people have got questions, if you want to start thinking, oh, I'd like to know, how many of this animal are used or what's the breakdown of X, Y, and Z, then hopefully we can have a look at that together. So I will share my screen.
Just before
Cool.
you begin,
hmm
if you don't want to rely on your memory, if you just want to put your questions in the chat, we can come to them that way as well. Back to you.
Cool. Thank you. So I am, as Imogen said, my name's Jessamy. I'm Head of Science at Animal Aid. Hopefully, you'll all know who Animal Aid is, but if no one does, or if you're not sure, we are an animal rights group. We were founded in January 1977, so we've been going for nearly 50 years. And one of the campaigns that we started campaigning on was against animal experiments. And we campaign against all animal experiments on moral and sort of ethical and scientific grounds. So we don't sort of just campaign for certain species or against certain animal experiments. We're opposed to all of them. So I'm here to talk to you about the stats. So the stats are described in the sort of blurb as regulated procedures. So probably a lot of you will know that the procedures are regulated, although as we know that doesn't make any difference to the horror and suffering that the animals undergo. But the definition of a regulated procedure is any procedure applied to a protected animal for an experimental or other scientific purpose or for an educational purpose that may have the effect of causing an animal pain, suffering, distress, or lasting harm, which is equivalent to or higher than that caused by the introduction of a needle in accordance with good veterinary practice. So anything above sort of, an injection would be classified as a regulated procedure. So the purposes that experiments can be done for are many and varied, as a lot of you will probably know. If anyone's got any questions when we get to the question bit about, what's this sort of procedure or what's basic research, then do shout. So one thing about the counting, so this is taken from the actual guidance. Sorry, this is a bit text heavy, but it just kind of outlines exactly how the stats are done and what they show you. So the figures provided in the stats report, which we'll be looking at in a little bit, refer to the numbers of procedures which are completed rather than the number of animals which are used for the first time. So in most cases, they will be different. Sometimes the number of procedures will be the same as the number of animals used. So each procedure, which may consist of several stages, is counted once for the year in which it was completed. So a study which involves procedures on a number of animals is counted once for each animal because the animals are counted the first time they're used. So where an animal has previously been used in a procedure and it's used again, it's counted as a separate procedure, but the animal itself isn't recounted because, again, animals are counted the first time they're used. So that's a bit wordy, but I hope it makes sense because there's some confusion sometimes whether you're looking at the number of animals that are used or the number of procedures which are done. And this is why some of you might have noticed, if you look at the stats for this year, which came out on the 23rd of October, there were 11,483 procedures on horses, but there were 60 horses used for the first time. So that doesn't mean that there were 11,000 procedures on those 60 horses. Other horses might have been used for the first time in 2023, others used for the first time in 2022, and that's just the number of procedures that were done on all the horses. I hope that makes sense. So this is the sort of top line figures for last year, for 2024. I've color coded them just so you can see them a little bit more clearly. So you can see there were 2.6 million procedures in Great Britain, and of those 2.2 million were in England, and then 370,000 in Scotland, and then 25,000 in Wales. And you can also see, can you see my cursor on the screen? Is that, yep. So here you can see, so these are experimental procedures. So these are the sorts of things that I think a lot of people would consider as being an experiment. So whether you're operating on an animal or doing something sort of specific to them. And these, the column next to it for the creation and breeding of genetically altered animals, these are animals that are bred in order for the offspring to be used in experimental procedures. So these animals aren't actually used in experiments. But although some people think, oh, that sounds benign, you know, just breeding animals, there's a lot of surgical alteration to animals. Obviously, their genes are being affected. Animals are killed. The females are given hormones in order to make them ovulate and have produce lots and lots of eggs. So it's not just as you would think of animals breeding, sort of if left to their own devices. So there's still pain, suffering, distress, and harm caused to animals who are being used for breeding. So as I said, so we've got the creation and maintenance of genetically altered lines of animals, and then there's scientific procedures, which can be for things like, so regulatory experiments are those which are required by law. Then you've got basic research, which can also be called fundamental research. So that can be done to gain knowledge, and the knowledge that is gained doesn't have to save lives, it doesn't have to protect animals or humans, it doesn't have to protect the environment. Those experiments can be done just the sole aim of those experiments can be to gain knowledge. Then we have translational experiments done for translational research. So these are things usually to try and find a cure for disease. As I said, education and training. So this can be at universities. It can be done to train surgeons or to train vets. There might be experiments done for the preservation of species. So these can use certain animals, a group of animals, in order to try and save other animals of that species. And then we've got forensic experiments. We haven't had any experiments for forensic reasons for quite a few years, but they're still in there. That's still one of the purposes for which experiments can be conducted. And as you can imagine, that can be things like, you know, looking at hanging or suicide. So these are the figures. As I said, the figures are quite dry and a bit sort of mind-boggling, I think, sometimes, because there's so many of them. So what I've done here is just highlighted in red the different areas of research. So as I said, this is basic research, this is translational and applied research, these are for the protection of the natural environment. And you can see here we've got all the numbers for Great Britain, and some of the tables are split out, so you can look at Scotland, England and Wales. And then you've got the sort of class of the animal, so you can have a look at all the mammals or just reptiles. Primates, obviously they're mammals as well. And then you've got the different species of animals. It's interesting, I think, sometimes if you look, it says here other mammals and other carnivores, and there's a table right at the end which tells you exactly what that means. So what, you know, what animals are used within those classifications. And then you've got preservation of species, higher education and training, forensic inquiries. I said there weren't many done. There's 2 there. So this is, if you literally scroll down, according to this, it was 2 sheep that we used for forensic inquiries. One thing to know, although we have these statistics and they're published every year, often there'll be a sort of an amendment. So in the next statistics, it will say, well, we said this number, but that wasn't actually correct. Someone put a number in the wrong column. So sometimes you might look at something and think, well, that looks a bit odd, but just because it's in there, it doesn't mean that that's actually what happened. It might be corrected later on. So we've got forensic inquiry, then we've got regulatory. So this is toxicology and things required by law. So as you can see, there's quite a big number in there for all the animals, 315,000. So again, this is your total experimental procedures is 1.4 million. The animals that were bred in order to create genetically altered offspring, so that's 1.2 million, and they're not themselves used in experiments, but that's still 2.6 million animals. So that's for last year for Great Britain. So severity is one of the things that's outlined in the statistics. And as I mentioned before, this is a measurement of the pain, suffering, distress, and lasting harm that the animals suffer. There are different categories of severity, and the highest of these is severe. And this is just an example of the sorts of experiments that would be classed as severe. So there can be toxicity testing where death is the endpoint, complete isolation for prolonged periods of time for social species such as dogs and primates, models with the induction of tumours or with spontaneous tumours that are expected to cause progressive lethal disease associated with long-lasting moderate pain, distress or suffering. It's also important to note that the severity only counts the amount of, or tries to quantify the amount of pain, suffering, distress and lasting harm that the animals undergo whilst they're on the actual license or actually having the experiment done to them. So if an animal is shipped halfway around the world and undergoes, days of travel, distress, fear, none of that is counted in the severity classification. It's just what happens to them while they're actually on license, as it's called, or whilst the experiment's actually happening. So these are the severity classifications. So this table is enormous. So all I've done is just sort of take the top half. So if you can see here, we can see that the number of mice used, if you scroll along to here, so 2.9% of the mice that we used suffered severe pain, distress, and lasting harm. And then if you go down to rats, it's 0.1%, which obviously 0.1 is a very small number. But then if you look along to the actual number of, this is the number of experimental procedures. So again, this isn't the number of animals, but it's probably about the same for rodents. So there you can see it was 1,158 experiments were severe for rats and 42,000 for mice. And then you've got all the other classifications of severity, so mild, moderate, non-recovery, which means the animals are anaesthetized for the whole of the experiment. And then, so we know how many animals are used in experiments, but there are animals that are bred but not used. So this is a piece of text from the website of Nature Watch Foundation. So one of their campaigns is about the animals that are bred but aren't used and that aren't counted. So they say 2017 marked the last and only time that the UK publicly reported in their annual statistics the number of animals who were used for science overall. So it was 5.53 million animals, because there were 1.81 million animals who were bred and not used for any scientific procedures. So that was about a third of the total of animals used in 2017, and that figure was published then, and we've not seen it since, and I don't think we're likely to. It was one of the reason it was published was because we're part of the European Union, and obviously since Brexit, there's not that requirement for establishments to report that number. So we have no idea how many animals were bred and not used. And that's the link to Nature Watch Foundation and their Forgotten Lives campaign. So it was a bit of a whistle stop. I don't know if anyone's got any questions. I can try and share my the tables that I've done. If there's anything anyone wants to know, or if anyone's got any questions on what I've said, happy to turn it over to you guys to hopefully answer any questions. Thank you. I'll stop sharing while I can see everyone's faces, and then if people want to go through the tables, I can wrest back control, if that's all right, and then show you my tables.
Yeah, Roger put a couple of comments in the chat. I don't know if you saw them. Just saying, creation is a lovely speciesist word, isn't it?
Yes. Doesn't it sound benign?
Doesn't it just? Yeah, indeed. And the percentage of zebrafish is drawn attention to as surprising.
Which I didn't actually notice.
Which slide was that?
That was on the first one that you showed, I think.
Oh, where is it? That one. Oh. I'm not sure how I can share now from here. Sorry.
Did you want to elaborate on that, Roger? I didn't actually see the number. So was it a high number? Was it a low number? Were you expecting higher or lower?
Yeah.
Hey,
can you hear me?
Yes.
Splendid. Yeah, it was. I picked out from the stats that we're talking about 71% mice, but the zebrafish was, I think, almost 10%, which seemed to be, quite high. And I was wondering, what is it that the poor old zebrafish can offer to vivisection?
Yeah, that's a good. It was yeah. Sorry, thank you, Roger. It was 11.9%. Zebrafish, bless them, have the the misfortune of being transparent. So you can, if you're so minded, you can genetically modify them and sort of surgically alter them, but you can actually see what's happening inside them. So they're used in genetic studies, a lot of cardiac research. If we can sort out how fish mend their own hearts, because I think they've got, to a certain extent, their hearts regenerate. They've got certain sort of cardiac qualities that humans don't have. And I have heard it sort of said, if we can work out how the zebrafish, how their hearts work, then we can help humans, which makes me also think, but they also breathe underwater. So are we going to be able to teach ourselves?
It'd be nice if vivisectors'
well?
morality could regenerate, wouldn't it? Really,
but that was a good spot. I think it's quite interesting sometimes when you sort of look at the species that people don't expect to be used, or you sort of know that animals are used, but sort of knowing the quantities they're used in, or the different sorts of areas of research they're used in, sometimes can be quite astonishing.
Yeah, it just caught my eye, so I just wanted to.
They're used in sort of genetics and cardiac research, unfortunately.
Yeah, okie.
Are there any other questions that anybody would like to pose?
Feel free to unmute and speak if you would like to.
I was just going to ask, it might be a stupid thing, but what happens to the animals that are bred that don't go on to experimentation? Does that mean that they are then killed off, or is there any pressure from any charity to kind of try and rescue those particular animals, or any pressure from anyone that thinks that those animals should be kind of released? Or have you ever known that happen within the... Go on, sorry.
No, you finish.
I was going to say, has that happened in the fraternity that are experimenting on animals? Do they kind of, see that these animals that are surplus could actually go?
I think most of the animals that are used for the creation and maintenance of GA lines, as they call it, pardon me, are rodents, rats and mice. So rats and mice tend to be rehomed a lot less. I don't know that I've ever seen programs where they'll rehome rats and mice. I think because They
Right.
can't be bothered. There are, I do know of cases where primates have been sort of released,
Yeah.
and some dogs have been released from laboratories. One thing, and I think it's still the case, used to be that when you started doing experiments on the animals, obviously you probably know that there's a license application, so you have to put in a license saying this is what I want to do and this is the animals I want to do it with and this is the harm benefit. It used to be the case, and I think it still is, that if you'd intended to rehome those animals at the end, you had to put it on the license when you applied to do the work. So that's quite a lot of forward thinking. In 2 years' time, we might be in a position where we would want to rehome these animals. I know of dogs that have been rehomed, and there's sort of some establishments that have had dogs have said, oh well, they can't be rehomed because they're not used to being outside, they're not used to humans, they're not used to this, they're not used to that. I mean, my dog spent the first 2 years of his life in a sanctuary in China. He was taken off a truck on the way to being murdered for someone's food. He had never been in a house, he'd never played with a human, but he settled in absolutely fine. And a lot of the beagles, and well, it's typically beagles that are sort of rehomed from laboratories, they're very capable of learning what it's like to live in someone's house rather than in a cage. So I think it tends to be dogs and primates that are rehomed, and less so other animals. I think just because it's obviously time and money to rehome them. And there used to be a couple of groups that were quite, their sort of focus was on providing homes to beagles when they sort of finish. But obviously, again, it's up to the establishment that's using them. They have to put it into the license before they start using them. They also have to, spend the time and the energy helping those animals be able to sort of, be ready for life with other humans. So I don't know. I don't think it obviously doesn't happen as much as people would want, but I suspect with rodents and the smaller animals, there are so many of them. And
so it's quite a long process then when you see like monkeys that have been like let go from laboratories, and beagles, because you see beagles being taken from research places that have been let go by that establishment. So there's obviously a lot of work that goes into that then, because I wasn't aware of that, but there must be quite a bit of work to release those animals to the relevant people outside that are taking them into their care, because you've seen that in America where places shut down and they've gone out to these rescue people that need, from America. So there's obviously quite a bit of work that goes in. I didn't realise that there's quite a lot of work.
Yeah, I think Humane World for Animals, they've done sort of work rescuing beagles. But I know, obviously, I think some places, and this is only hearsay that I've heard, some places will rehome animals, but they prefer to rehome them to the staff because obviously, they have an idea of where they've gone and what happens to them. I mean, if an animal is used in an actual experiment and they're used for something like toxicology, one of the things about the toxicology is at the end they will kill them and then, look at their organs. So obviously, any animal that's sort of used in an experiment is less likely to be rehomed. I think a lot of the primates that I know of, and well, a lot of the beagles that I know of have been used for things like they've been using them for blood sampling. So that's something where they, the animal can be released. But I know, I've known in the past of animals that have been in laboratories and homes have been offered for them. We will take them when the experiments are finished and they've still killed the animal because they don't want to release them.
Right.
So.
Oh, well, thank you for answering that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just on that note, Louise, and for everybody else as well, there is a petition out at the moment. I'm not sure who's constructed it, but that's a mandate for ethical rehoming for lab and breeding animals by 2025.
Oh, brilliant!
And that will be available on the FEAT website as well.
Oh, brilliant!
And I'm guessing I can probably get a link put up somewhere as well in the FEAT chat and stuff.
It's in desperate need of signatures. It's
gosh.
only on just over 1,000, and it's been there for a while. So
I think it runs out on January the 29th, if my memory serves me.
need to
Right.
push in.
Okay. Thanks for that.
Yeah, no worries. There's so another question in the chat. So very depressing stuff, but important to know the facts. Thank you.
Sorry.
Very depressing stuff, but important to know the facts. Thank you. Thinking about how we can support stopping this. In another webinar last week, Dr. Andre Minash highlighted the early day motion 187. Do you know much about this and how influential it could be?
No, I don't know anything about it at all. That's embarrassing. No, I don't.
No, I don't either.
Yes.
I know Andre, that helps.
Yes.
But I don't know early day motion. The early day motion 187.
It's basically pushing for a scientific hearing on experiments.
Okay.
So encouraging all MPs to sign that, obviously. So that there's an actual like proper research into whether it is effective. So yeah, I think that's a really important one for MPs to get behind. And our MP here, so we contacted him, and his initial response was, as Lib Dems, we are in favour of ending animal experimentation, blah, 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 blah. And then I said, so have you signed the EDM? And he was like, oh, I'll go away and have a look at that. It's like he kind of hadn't really paid attention to what I'd originally said. So once I pushed it, he was like, yeah, thank you for raising that, and I will now go and sign it. So
Brilliant.
It definitely is worth doing. I know, those people will know their MPs and how likely it is they'll do such things, but it's still worth asking, even if you know they won't.
Yeah, and I do think, I mean, I've heard from a couple of MPs and their office, or their people in their offices, that animal welfare and animal experiments are the top or the second biggest issue that they get emails about and letters about. So I think it is really important to just keep saying to them, what do you think about this? Have you signed this? What are your views on stuff? Because I think, it's really important for them to have an opinion, and have an opinion that's based in fact and the reality of what's happening. So yeah, no, I haven't. I'll have a look at that when we finish the call.
And I know another thing is that lots of people have sent the Pandora Pound book to their MPs. Rat Trap, because much as it kind of feels wrong from our point of view, it puts aside entirely the ethics, which, to many of us here, that's like bizarre. But actually, if you're putting that aside and can still say it's totally wrong, then obviously for some people that's going to make a lot of difference. And even if they couldn't care less about the animals, but it's wrong as far as people are concerned, then that's really relevant, isn't it?
Yeah, I think.
Can I ask you a question? What do you think of the roadmap that the government have said about? What do you think about that yourself? Do you think it's, because there's a lot of people who are saying, the animal experiments need to just be gone, but they're saying about phasing these things out. What do you think realistically about that?
It's really difficult because, well, it's not really difficult. I think because I've been doing this for a long time, as I expect a lot of you have, this is the first time we've had a government saying our ultimate aim is to get rid of animal experiments. That's the goal. I've never heard a government say that before. So from that perspective, it gives me hope. But there are lots of things in there that are not what I would have written. And there's things like, their definition of alternatives is something that can use fewer animals. And to me, that's not what an alternative is. An alternative is not using an animal, using a non-animal method. So to say we're going to use 6 animals instead of 12, and that's an alternative, that's problematic, I would say. Animal Aid have campaigned for against the lethal dose LD50 test, and all sort of lethal dose animal tests, you know, and all the animal experiments, and we're really disappointed that that's not in sort of basket 1, which is the bit that is, you know, the first set of tests that will be got rid of or will be phased out. And they talk about sort of because lethal dose 50 measures lethality, which is animals dying, and we know that, you know, when animals are being monitored in laboratories, that there is not anyone sitting there looking at their cages. Not that if they were, that would make it okay, it wouldn't. But if you're looking at an animal's cage once every day, there's a hell of a lot of suffering that can happen in 23 hours between someone looking at an animal and then coming back now, you know, a day later and that animal's died. So they talk about, you know, whether they're, instead of using the animal's death as an endpoint, they'll be looking at evident toxicity, what they call it. Yes, I think it's evident toxicity, but that can still mean that animals are having tremors, they've lost huge amounts of weight. So it's almost sort of one lot of horrible cruelty replacing another lot of horrible cruelty. And I just think if you're going to say, well, they're not dying, we're just looking we're looking for something that shows that they probably will die, you still have to be very, very compromised to be in a position where you're probably going to die, which is horrific suffering. And there's, you know, there's some stuff that is in there that's going to, I think the pyrogen testing using rabbits, they're talking about banning it by the end of this year, but I don't think we've done any pyrogen testing in this country for a long time. So whilst that's great, you know, nothing that anyone else can put out is going fast enough or is you know, ambitious enough. I want it all finished yesterday, and I think, you know, everyone in this call, it feels the same, but I kind of have hope that there's something written down and that it's almost like, you know, right now our job is to say to MPs, right, have you seen the roadmap? What do you think about it? Are you going to push the government? Will you write to the minister and ask about this? Will you get onto the committees that are looking at this, that and the other? Because I think it's the first time in my lifetime, I think, that we've had a government saying we are going to phase this out. And we know, like Imogen was saying, even if, you know, people aren't bothered about the ethical side of what happens to the animals, you know, the science is just showing us every day. We're seeing science saying this is really bad, and, you know, this is really good. And it's like, well, why are we not using the really good science, which also just happens to not use animals? But there's, you know, if I think of young people coming out of university, think if you want a job for the next 40, 50, 60 years, then you're going to be going into non-animal methods, because we know that they are going to be around forever. Whereas when you look at what people are doing with animals, if you want a career in 40, are we still going to be doing animal experiments in this country in 40 years? I hope to goodness we're not. So if you want a career in, you know, science that you're going to be able to do for the next 60 years, you're going to go into non-animal methods. So one thing that is promising in the roadmap, I keep calling it the roadmap, the strategy, is that they're talking about giving training to all early career scientists and PhD students in non-animal methods, whether they are going to do animal work or not. So even if someone's doing a PhD in, I don't know, cancer in mice, they will have to have training, or they will undergo training in non-animal methods. So hopefully that might make some people think, oh, actually, that looks much more elegant, the science looks better than what I'm doing, and might make people, you know, change their minds, at least if they're made aware of the different career paths that there are. I think that is a useful thing. But yeah, there's things to be hopeful for in there, but there's other things which are just like, what, really? No.
You're right, thank you.
What are your thoughts on it?
Oh, I just my thoughts are I'd really like to see it all gone, you know, animal experiments, and for new technologies which are coming through, are coming through, and I think it looks very hopeful. There's a lot there to kind of be hopeful for, you know, kind of, but at the same time it just seems to be moving very, very slowly. And you know, considering we've been doing animal testing, for nearly 200 years, is it? Using animals for...
1896, I think, was the first... yeah, 1896 was the first act, and then there was the 1986 act, and that, yeah. So yeah, long time.
So you're looking at a very, very long time, and you just think, isn't there everything that you know that's out there? Why do they have to keep on going over the same old ground? There's so much now that's been covered. You think, how do they kind of believe that themselves by using animals in certain researches that they don't look at and think, well, actually, you know, maybe we should be moving on morally. We should, this should be what we should be doing. And yet we find ourselves still kind of in the past when everything's sort of moving forward. You just think, how are we still stuck in the scientific field of using animals when everything else is moving forward? It seems very antiquated to me.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, it is. I mean, there's not, it's like the LD50. I mean, we campaign, well, that's one of the things we specifically campaigned against, and it was devised in 1927. And when you look at cars from 1927, they're like the size of a house and moved at like 3 miles an hour. And you think of telephones, you know, and I don't even know if they had computers, you know, but when you look at the technology that was technology in place in 1927, and now that, you know, what we've got for telephones now, and things have come on in leaps and bounds. But then in 1927, they were still, you know, poisoning rodents to see roughly what would kill 50% of them, and that's what's still happening now. So it's a real anomaly that some of the tests are that old and they just are still around.
A moral imperative is to move away from it, and yet we seem to still be, the medical fraternity seems to drag its feet on so much of it in terms of moving these things forward in the right way, and also the government as well. And, you know, the pharmaceutical industry in itself, you just think, God, it all seems so heavy weighted.
I think there's, I mean, I think there's work being done in different places, but none of it's quick enough for what any of us would like, sadly.
Is it, excuse me, I always trying to get my words in the right order. Interesting word usements, not a structure. I'm reluctant to have faith in a proposal that's put forward by a government that won't be here. Do you know, you've got a government saying that this is our roadmap, this is our strategy, it's going to take 5-10 years or whatever. You know, they're talking about a time span that they're not going to be here for, or may well not be here for. Really,
I think it's very. Sorry.
No, your turn.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's one of those things, isn't it? You kind of, I mean, you look on different government websites and it will say, well, this page was done under that government and this page was under that government. So, you know, I hope and pray that as much of it is implemented, you know, so that whatever happens when we have the next election, it can, you know, things are in place that can't be got rid of.
Well, let's hope so. The comment by Sheila here that says, I was looking at the FLOE website yesterday and I thought it was good that they don't use the word alternative, because that implies that animal experiments that have failed are being replaced with NAMS that are vastly more predictive and reliable.
Well, I just thought it was interesting because I think I heard Jessamy use the word alternative, and it's not something I thought about myself before, and I didn't even know about the Life on Earth, who were promoting the EDM 187. So that was new to me yesterday. Came up in the campaign to ban animal testing and research in the UK Facebook group. And I just thought I was just making the point. I thought it was quite interesting because we're not replacing, you know, like for like, are we? We're moving towards much more predictive and reliable methods. And so if you look at their website, you'll see, you know, they explain it probably a lot better than I have in my comment. But no, I just thought it was interesting. It's quite, you know.
Well, I know the government strategy talks about an alternative, and that's their wording, and one of their wordings is, you know, an alternative can use fewer animals. And I agree. I think alternative makes it sound as if it's like for like, and it's not. Thanks, Deb. Deb says, I think you were quoting the government.
Yeah, you probably
Because
were,
I
yeah.
always say non-animal methods, or even better, non-animal new approach methodologies, because NAMS
Yeah.
is sort of, a new approach methodology, but some new approach methodologies can involve the use of animals. So to sort of get rid of any confusion, I'd say non-animal new approach methodologies, but obviously that's quite a mouthful.
Right.
So, NAMS, because I think, if you call a non-animal method an alternative, it makes it sound as if, well, you can use this thing or this thing, which is they're not
exactly.
comparable
one
at
or the
all.
other.
One is terrible and is unscientific, and one isn't. So absolutely, no, I agree with you.
As part of that as well, there's the continuing rhetoric around the fact that the animal testing is the gold standard.
And a lot of animal methods have never been validated. So, you're looking at having to validate non-animal new approach methodologies, but they're having to jump over a much higher bar than that, because animal experiments have never been sort of tested for their robustness and reliability. Dominic says, had forgotten the name of this animal-free toxicology lab pioneering animal-free LD50. Yes, Accelerate. Thank you, Dominic. They are a laboratory in Cheshire, and they're sort of, I think, probably the only vegan laboratory in the whole world, because they don't use any animal cells. They don't use live animals, but they don't use animal tissues, don't use animal cells. They don't even use animal media in any of the sort of solutions that they use to grow the cells, because some non-animal methods might not be using an animal, but they might be growing human cells in horse blood, or something that comes from animals. And Animal Aid's roadmap, and one of the things we put in our roadmap was how a non-animal method has to be non-animal, because scientifically, if you're growing human cells but you're growing them in animal sera, then that's introducing a contaminant and you're affecting the cells. But also, if you're taking something from an animal to grow human cells, you're harming that animal. So it can't be cruelty free if you're harming animals to get the stuff to grow the human cells.
Deborah says that she had read that some NAMs take 7 years to be validated.
Yeah, if not longer. I was looking at an European sort of guideline thing recently, and it was talking about validation taking sort of hundreds and thousands of euros and sort of 7 to 10 years. And that's a long time if you think that's for, one method.
Do you know what the reasoning behind that is?
I think it's to sort of, make sure that all these methods that aren't animal research are robust and reliable, and that different laboratories doing them, if 10 laboratories are doing them, they're all getting the same results, to check that it's reliable and reproducible and that sort of thing. Everything that animal experiments aren't, sadly. Dominic says yes, fecal calf serum, which is a particularly horrible substance that's used in laboratories for growing cells and things. It's taken from fetal calves in slaughterhouses. As you can imagine, that's horrific.
Sheila, Sheila has a hand up. Do you want to say something again, Sheila? Sheila, you have your hand raised.
Bated breath.
Sorry, I'm fiddling around with my on my phone. Sorry. Yeah, is it okay if I say something else?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so no, it was just about the fetal calf serum. I mean, it's just incredible how, the more I, attend presentations and things and read, there's so much to learn, isn't there? And I don't know if anyone else has joined any of the Centre, CAAT, I can't remember what it stands for. It's at Johns Hopkins University, Centre for Animal something alternatives to animal testing. And they've been doing a series of presentation, kind of webinars. And unfortunately, they've pulled the series title is something like 3 hours webinars, which puts everyone off because they think it's about 3 hours, but it's not at all. I don't know why they've done that. But the last one was a presentation from this guy in Belgium, is it, or the Netherlands? I can't remember. You probably know about it. They've produced an alternative to fetal calf serum, a medium that can be used. But a lot of these CAAT sessions are mainly targeted at early career researchers, and they did a little poll at the beginning, and like more than 70% of people attending said that they still used fetal calf serum, even though there is an alternative already available. They just didn't know about it. So it's like, why? Why aren't they kind of, they're using non-animal methods, but with fetal calf serum as a medium. I mean, it's just bonkers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, it was just a comment really again.
I think sometimes it's just, I'm not speaking for people who are doing that, who work in laboratories, because I don't, but I think a lot of times people aren't sure of, will my cells grow exactly the same way, if I alter something. And I think that's the case with a lot of human behavior is tradition. We like to do what we've always done and we know works, or we know works in a certain way, or sort of half works. There's that comfort thing. So I think sometimes people just, even if they know about something, they think, oh, well, it might not work, so I'll just carry on doing what I'm doing. But then I think a lot of people just perhaps don't even, think of, they just grab a bottle of something off the shelf, perhaps don't think where it comes from if they're not minded to think of animals in that way. And let's face it, a lot of people in, we meet in everyday society aren't minded to think of animals as anything other than something to, consume in some way or another. But I think, the more people know about things like that, and the more scientists are aware of the alternatives that they can use that don't contain any animal products, then the better. I mean, I just had a quick look through and I can't find it, but there's something on the Accelerate website, which I think someone flagged it in the chat, Dominic did. They've got a piece on just a little bit on their website saying, we don't use any animal products at all because it's better science. It's more robust, it's more reproducible, you get cleaner results, so that's why we don't do it. So I think, if more people went that way and followed their lead, that would obviously be better.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Sheila, about the CAAT. I don't know if you wanted to share a little bit more about, you said that they're doing talks and so on. Have you had to join or something, or are they free talks? Do you want to share a little bit more about those?
Yeah, no, they're free. Trying to remember where I first, I think it was in the FEAT chat.
Oh, cool.
Alan, when Alan set up the messenger group for FEAT, someone posted one, and then quite a few people got very irate because they hadn't actually read the description. They just saw it said 3 hours webinar.
Yeah, right.
Yes,
but it's nothing to do with the 3 hours. I keep meaning to write to the woman behind it and say, look, that's really off-putting. But they're like I said, they're mainly targeted at early career researchers, but they're for anyone, like people like us who are interested and do sort of outreach and stuff, just members of the public. I've attended 3 so far. They also publish them on the recordings on their website.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you.
So Centre for Alternatives to Animal Testing. It's they've been extremely excellent presentations that I've seen.
Brilliant. Yeah, Endeavour says you can subscribe to the newsletter and get notified.
Yeah, I get the emails from them. Yeah,
I suppose entitling it to 3 hours might not be quite so off-putting if you're in the industry. Might actually draw people in, I suppose.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sheila.
Whenever I share them, I have to sort of put a kind of
Caveat.
A note,
Caveating.
Disclaimer. Yeah.
It's just the 1R. I think you may be right, Imogen. I think it's people sort of, think of the 3Rs, don't they? That, or, as a thing rather than sort of,
rather than 3 separate parts to it. It's just that's just the title. The industry standard. Is there anything else?
There's a comment from Jacqueline. Look.
Oh, yeah. Jacqueline says that I'm sure Animal Free Research UK have developed a non-animal serum.
Do you know anything about that? Yeah.
I don't know. I know they've got laboratories, haven't they? And they've got researchers working on things. I mean, years ago when I worked for a different group, we had an application from a scientist who was doing some, I think it was neurotox stuff, so sort of toxicity of things to the brain, and they wanted to use fetal calf serum. So we said to them, you can do your project, but you're not using fetal calf serum, so we'll give you extra funding for 6 months work to, before you even start getting to the point where you would have added the fetal bovine serum to your cells. Find a non-animal method and we'll fund you to do that, and then you can, once you've refined that and got that to what you would expect if you weren't using your new method, then you can do it. So I think sometimes all it takes is for someone to say, hold on a second, is this the best you can do? And here's a bit of money, which is one of the things we asked for in our roadmap, in Animal Aid's roadmap, was to, divert funding from animal experiments to non-animal methods. And I know there is some money in the government strategy, but whether it's enough, to really, because what you really want to do is phase out, well, get rid of straight away, but it's almost like turning one tap on really full for the non-animal methods and turning off that tap very quickly for the animal methods. So if you stop the funding but divert it to the non-animal methods, so yeah, I think sometimes it's just potentially looking at the question in a different way.
Jacqueline also says that Animal Free Research UK produce podcasts with different scientists that are very interesting and positive.
Yeah, they are very interesting. Really good stuff. Also mentions
is my hand invisible? I can't find the little yellow one.
I can see. I can see that hand.
It must be maybe just one of those zebrafish hands.
Yeah, that's it.
See through.
I got to say, just my last contribution, I suppose, is this is quite depressing because I've kind of given up single issues. I don't see the point of them, and I don't value political campaigning, as a lot of people might know. I think you're wasting your time with government. Most politicians are scumbags, and they just follow the votes and the money. And so what we need is a change in cultural speciesism. Because going back to what Louise said, is the problem is a global, vivisection is a globalized industry. I put the thing about Philip Rogers in there. I was actually typing on the wrong keyboard, because I helped launch a campaign in 1982 against Hazelton Laboratories, and that became Covents, and I think it's something else now. And I think he was the director at the time. And he said then that the LD50 was useless. And I was quite surprised to hear that it's still going, because we smashed into the place and got loads of their documents, ended up in Robert Sharp's book, and I think it was in the BOAV, and I think it might have even been an outrage. And so, it kind of doesn't work. It's just that they were doing paraquat experiments for a Japanese company, because it's a globalized thing. And it's not as though one country can get out of it. So it's got to be a globalized solution. And it seems to me that we're not going to get anywhere on vivisection without a change in cultural speciesism, which is our number one problem. So that's why I don't do single issues anymore, because like you said, Alan, politicians, they're in for 5 years, if that. They can say what they want. They know that signing an EDM doesn't mean anything. and so in that sense, we can be very skeptical about governments and their plans. I mean, the governments have been issuing plans for decades, and they never come to anything because they never have to, because they're not around long enough. Anyway, that was just my last kind of depressed contribution, really.
Well, I can fully understand where you're coming from. I mean, obviously, we're very much on the same page. Just on the global issue, though, do you not think that we can tackle it unilaterally?
No, how can we? We're in a globalized market.
Because other countries require animal testing as part of their legislation for us to sell our products. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's a little bit like, every single farming group in the world says we've got the best animal welfare in the world, all that crap, right? Now, the thing is, it's not true, because it can't be true, because an individual country cannot stand outside of a globalized system and survive. It's just too expensive. You're isolated then from global markets, and it just won't work. And so that means that British scientists will move. So it just won't work in that kind of sense. If you've got a globalized problem, you've got to have a globalized solution.
Question from Deborah. Moving on, sorry. Thank you for that comment, Roger. Kind of totally agree, but on the other hand, while we're here, what do you think, Jessamy, about the moves that the United States are making?
I think they're positive. I think, the FDA, I'm just trying to pluck it from my memory banks. I mean, the FDA, the Food and Drugs Administration in the US had a sort of a roadmap, which they published in April. And the sort of one of the first things they said was, we know that drug testing in animals doesn't work. 90% of drugs that pass, animal trials don't ever get FDA authorization. And there are, things that we should be doing differently and, moving towards using non-animal methods. And I think, again, there was a lot of stuff in there that was quite ambitious and was talking in sort of the language that, probably many of us would be using. So I was encouraged. I don't expect a wait from Roger to say he wasn't encouraged at all, but
I don't know if you wanted to come back on what Roger was saying as well. I don't know if you had any sort of thoughts around that.
I agree. We are in a global world. This is a global. Everything we do has sort of knock on. But I just think if we. I mean, I don't know what the alternative is if we say that, we can't do anything as a country or as a nation by ourselves. So what do? We don't. I think the fact that our government has said something that is, ambitious in part is to be welcomed, because I think, it's a step in the right direction. It's not going to be as fast as I would want or any of us would want, but I think it shows an intention to move that way.
I was going to say, I'd ask the question, because the USA have started to make these moves towards non-animal methods. Do you think that has something to do with why our government have now decided to move in that direction? Because it felt to me that when America started to talk about moving away from animal testing and into non-animal methods, that felt like a global shift, or the beginning, what's possibly a global shift, because obviously, America are one of the superpowers at the moment. So if they were to make a global shift in policy, if they were to make a domestic shift in policy, the global effects could be large. And given that we are always in the pocket of America, it just seems curious to me that suddenly our government were insinuating the same sort of thing, but then they did lie last time they were in power.
I mean, it was a manifesto pledge, wasn't it, that they would work with civil society and I can't remember the exact wording, but
it was very woolly wording, wasn't it?
But I mean, it was a manifesto pledge that they would have a roadmap to phase out animal testing. I think that was sort of in a nutshell what it was, and that was what, May 2024. So I think a lot of it is the fact that the science is just, the science is so clearly, the non-animal science or non-animal methods are so evolved and so transparently better than animal anything involving animals, that it's really obvious that the way forward, and economically as well, if you want to have a robust economy, you should be investing in non-animal methods, and that's where you should be training your workforce, and that's where you should be sort of investing money, rather than sort of the antiquated stuff that people have been doing for 150, 200 years.
Dominic says, you're right, Roger, but we can only influence our domestic policy, and if we succeed, the country can become a leading light on the global stage, a lot like we should be doing in terms of the climate emergency. I do feel like there's merit in that. I do feel that whoever goes first, Andre, the other last week, said it's like the domino effect. It's getting that first one to go, which is the hardest part. And it feels to me, I mean, I'm the eternal optimist, but it feels to me that one of those dominoes is starting to tip. And I think once that goes, everything will move really, really quickly.
Yeah, and no one wants to be left behind. No government wants to sort of be. And, you're hearing America saying about they're going to be the sort of, the global leader in non-animal methods. And then we're saying we're going to be it, and everybody's sort of vying to do it. So you've got to put your money where your mouth is and say, OK, train your scientists, divert the funds, start investing in this, because if you want to be a global leader, get moving now.
Yeah, we need to just keep shouting from the rooftops.
I know Roger feels very strongly about, not doing single issue campaigns. But I think there's maybe potential of using this as a way of talking about speciesism, sort of with the public and so on. Maybe.
I believe that. I mean, for me personally, I think that single issues, and particularly vivisection, are great gateway drugs. You don't have to be fully invested in the whole species narrative to find vivisection abhorrent. And in finding that abhorrent, you can then push those moral values into other species and into other areas where animal exploitation takes part.
So Deborah said, I'm not sure our government is moving in that direction. I think it's a smokescreen. They're doing damage limitation, which is certainly feasible. I don't know if Roger wanted to come back. We will need to wrap up fairly soon, but I don't know if I see Sheila's raised her hand, so we'll come to Sheila in a minute. But Roger, I don't know if you wanted to come back on the question that Deborah asked, because it was kind of aimed at you as well about the states and what's going on there.
Yeah, well, I do remember that Wayne Sean from DXE said that the second Trump administration might be the best kind of most vegan-friendly administration ever. I don't know where he gets that from, but in terms of vivisection, isn't the moves against using our fellow animals in vivisection something to do with Kennedy and his kind of quack ideas? And the US at the moment is under a fascist regime, but that's not going to last that long. In fact, there is evidence that MAGA is crumbling right now, and so I'm not quite sure how it would last. But that's what I'm saying. I'm not quite sure that individual country initiatives, and in terms of where we can only influence our domestic policy, I think that again that's why I always mention cultural speciesism. That's what Tom Reagan would call the fundamental issue. That's our fundamental number one problem. So long as we've got a parliament which is deeply speciesist, you're not going to get anything out of them. which is why all the legislation that comes out of a speciesist parliament is useless, like the hunting ban, or you get the fur ban, which just means that you're moving things around a global chessboard, right? And so there's all these kind of, nation problems. And the only real way is to change the culture. We need to have a cultural revolution before we can have a scientific one, in my view, because you can't kind of push it from the top. You've got to create it on a cultural level. We've all been talking about, well, blimey, we were talking about this in the early 80s. That's what Louise said. And, Jessamy, you were saying about, well, the non-animal methods are more scientific. Well, we've known that since Hans Reich and all the scientific anti-vivisectionists. And yet it makes no difference, because these politicians who are making these kind of promises are working within a global system. And that's why you've always got to be very skeptical, even jaundiced, I would say, in relation to what a politician says, for the reason that Alan mentioned, that they're not around very long, and so they don't tend to have long-term aspirations and stuff. They tend to, at the moment, the US government, British government, they're all in the pocket of Israel at the moment anyway. So, we've got some systematic, fundamental global problems, and vivisection is just swept up in all that, as far as I can see.
So just a tiny question, I think, for you from Jacqueline. How do you get cultural change in like 30 seconds or less, please?
Well, to quote Tom Reagan again, education, education, education. So we've got to, I'm a rights-based advocate, so I like to advocate for rights-based animal rights. So I'm not into welfare. I don't talk about cruelty. I talk about rights violations. I talk about our fellow animals being rights holders, rights bearers, and that means that when we use them, that's a rights violation. And so that's where I would go. And you try to say, well, this is the case for animal rights. It's an extensionist idea on the case for human rights. What do you think? And the more people we can get going, oh, that sounds like a good idea, that's when you get the cultural change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Roger. Sheila, do you want to...
Well, yeah,
possibly...
sorry, it's quite difficult to come in after Roger. I'm very new to this compared with people like Alan, Roger, and everyone else, or certain people here. And I agree, obviously, with Roger. We need this cultural shift. But in a way, the only way we can do that is just keep chipping away at different. I'm an animal rights activist now. I'm a member of Dorset Animal Action, and we do a lot in a lot of different areas. And I think we've got to use these opportunities. So, like doing We the Free, vegan outreach. We were out last week in Dorchester doing end animal testing outreach. We just have to keep chipping away. But yeah, I don't know how else you make that cultural shift. You've got to get people thinking about it. But anyway, sorry, I digress. But just one thing I wanted to say is go back to EDM 187. And again, following what Roger said, I get it. I read about EDMs a couple of days ago because we were sort of chatting about it in the Campaign to End Animal Testing and Research in the UK Facebook group. If you look at the AI response, it says that they're very rarely debated. The number, and apparently on the government webpage, the official page, it says the number of signatures on an EDM does not impact whether it's debated or not. So then you think, oh God, is it really worth trying to push this? Because we after Andre's Q&A session last week, he said it's really important to push this, and so Also in the light of what we were saying about, the government, only being in power for, 5 years or possibly less, I think that is another reason to push it. I do think, if we can get that debate, and, well, I'm going to listen to what Andre says. I think, he really wanted us to push that. So I think that's personally what we should do. And I'm focusing on that with our outreach and also comments online as much as possible.
Great, thanks.
And I'm glad you mentioned the domino effect, Alan. That Andre ended his session last week with that very positive thought about the domino effect, and that we've all got to meditate on that it's going to happen in sometime in the next few years.
Yeah, I think that's really important to bear in mind and look forward to. Jessamy, thanks, Sheila. Jessamy, I just wonder, just one final, maybe, I don't know what that one is down there. Okay, Kate's put a comment as well. I just wondered, Jessamy, if you wanted to comment on Herbie's law, somebody Jacqueline mentioned earlier.
I haven't looked at it for a while, so probably not.
Okay, that's fine.
I don't want to make stuff up on the hoof.
No, it's best not to.
Yes,
that's fine. Kate says, I believe 60 MPs are supporting EDM 187 and it's cross-party, so it could be positive even if this government aren't in power long. Yeah, if you look at the website, it does. You can see everyone who signed up to it.
I think, can I just also, I mean, you're all sort of, activists, so you probably all know this, but I mean, one thing to mention is some MPs can't sign EDMs because if they've got certain positions in government or whatever, but it's always worth asking MPs if they can't sign EDMs, will they write to the minister? Will they, do something else to support around the issue? So if your MP can't or won't sign, because some MPs won't sign EDMs because they don't think they're particularly effective or they've got other reasons, they just won't. But there's always something they can do.
I think we're probably on the cusp of wrapping up. Just to help people remain positive and to get us all in the same bubble, I suppose. A good friend of mine always said, and I'm always fond of repeating, what we need is everything, everywhere, all of the time. So attacking the government, taking it to the street, taking it to the laboratories, taking it to everybody, everywhere, all of the time is what we need to be doing. So wherever you can find your niche within that, then just exploit it, which is a divisive word, but yes. But
and use it to talk about speciesism.
And yes, I was going to say, use it to talk about speciesism, to expand the subject. Regardless, for me personally, regardless of what issue I'm actually tackling at the time and whatever conversation I'm having, it will always expand to cultural speciesism and the fact that we need to change that. We need to understand the change in language and our position within the world. And I think I look at every single issue as a gateway drug to that larger concept that we all need to take on board and to spread quickly, as quickly as we can, because that is the way things will get changed. So do you have anything that you'd like to wrap up with, particularly, Jessamy? Anything that as a nice closing statement? Don't worry if you don't.
No, just I think we've got to have hope. I mean, I think we've just I don't want to sound sort of feeble, but I think I think we just, like you say, keep writing to MPs, writing to local letters, talking to people, everyone you see, if there's a chance to talk about, did you know this company does that? Did you know this company doesn't do that? Just to keep talking about it in as many different ways as possible and to as many different people as possible, because I think every conversation's a chance for outreach in a way.
Yeah, I thoroughly agree. So I think on that note, we will call that an evening. Thank you very, very much to Jessamy for being our fount of knowledge and for the evening. And thank you,
You're welcome.
and thank you to everybody else that's made massive contributions this evening. This is recorded, so it will be available as soon as I get the link out. Once again, thank you ever so much to everybody that came, and I look forward to seeing you all in the future, either in person or on another one of these. But let's put the world to rights. So thank you kindly, and good night.
Take care.